Watch how Rachel Reeves faces one of the fiercest Commons clashes of her time as Chancellor, with MPs accusing her of economic chaos, endless U-turns and failing working families. As tempers flare across the chamber, her spring statement comes under relentless attack from all sides. Before we continue, hit like and subscribe to Britain Daily for more explosive political coverage. Let's watch this explosive clip.
The Chancellor's like a rogue landlord who keeps squeezing the tenant with higher and higher rents. All the while, the property is going to rack and ruin. I don't know who she's speaking to, but she needs to get out and talk to hard-working people who are hard up right now. People worried about their bills and the lack of good jobs, not the extremists that she cozies up to for votes. Now, the next scheme that the Chancellor has, to raise taxes on working people is to hike fuel duty at the pumps. Will she cancel it? Will she give some relief for care workers, for white van men, for hard-working people who get up early in the morning and drive to work, and who are the backbone of this economy?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
May I be the first to congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman on his new role. I know it wasn't the first job he wanted, or indeed the second one, but a spirited intervention. I'm not sure if he shared this one with George Osborne. I could venture maybe one piece of advice. The thing about betraying your party is that you have to stop asking your old friends for advice. But perhaps, given that he called his new colleague Zia useless a couple of months ago, he needs all the friends that he can have. Now, it might have been a couple of weeks ago, but the Right Honourable Gentleman used to be in a party that was going to get rid of the fuel duty support just 3 months after losing office. That was in the plans that we inherited and we scrapped them. As a result, we have extended... Well, they say it's rubbish, but it was actually in their last budget, and party's budget and his party's manifesto.
Esther Mapey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Chancellor now accept that there is a correlation between increasing national insurance contribution on employers and higher levels of unemployment? Or does she still believe those two things are not connected in any way?
What there's definitely a correlation between is the number of years the Conservatives are in office and how much worse off working people are.
I hope the Chancellor will accept that I'm someone who's challenged successive governments over inadequate defence spending. And if she does, will she also accept that it's not a wise idea to keep comparing current defence spending with the levels of defence spending, quotes, since the end of the Cold War? We're not in since the end of the Cold War now. We're in a hot war in Europe, and we're in an incendiary war in the Middle East. Does she know what percentage of GDP Mrs. Thatcher spent during the Cold War years of the 1980s? I'll give her a clue. It was twice what we spend now in terms of percentage GDP.
Chancellor.
The Honourable Gentleman stood on a manifesto a year and a half ago that had absolutely no explanation of how their party was going to increase defence spending. This government have increased defence spending, and so instead of criticising, I'm surprised he didn't welcome it.
Mr. Speaker, business has been crushed by the taxes brought in by this Chancellor. And, of course, just a year ago, in a fairly gloomy forecast by the OBR then, they were suggesting 1.8% GDP growth, 1.8 over the forecast period. That has now been reduced to 1.5%. And if the central mission of this Chancellor and supposedly this government is economic growth, how can it be that she can stand there today and say it's working, when on her central directive, the central mission, it's been marked by the OBR that she's going in exactly the wrong direction, making all our constituents poorer? Can she please explain that to the House?
Chancellor.
That is just completely wrong. What the OBR say today is that people will be £1,000 a year better off by the end of the forecast period, that GDP per capita will increase by 5.6% after having fallen under the previous government, and growth, productivity growth, was revised down, yes, at the budget because of the policies of the previous government. It has not been revised today.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The OBR's forecast has again downgraded oil and gas revenues. From March to November last year, it was downgraded by over 41%. From November to March now, it's been downgraded by another 20%. Ouch. By 2030, we're now expecting only £100 million of tax returns from the oil and gas industry, which used to return billions every year. That's because production is falling and investment is going abroad. When the Chancellor meets with oil and gas companies tomorrow, and I hope she has a great meeting, they will tell her that the reason and the thing that they need is the EPL to be taken away, because that's costing jobs, investment and energy security. Is she going to listen to them, or will she keep ignoring the sector?
Our country will continue to rely on oil and gas from the North Sea for many years to come. But I would just encourage the Honourable Lady to read the documents properly, because the reason why the money from the Energy Profits Levy, and this is just the Energy Profits Levy, not all the other taxes paid, the reason it falls is because the oil and gas prices have fallen so sharply since the budget last year. But of course, in the last couple of days, those oil and gas prices have increased hugely. The reason the Conservative government introduced the Energy Profits Levy in the first place was because the increase in oil and gas prices, and used that money to take money off people's bills. And so that's just from the... Look, the Honourable Lady just needs to go back and do her homework. That is just from the Energy Profits Levy and reflects the lower energy prices. Those energy prices, as some of her colleagues have mentioned, are unlikely to persist after what Iran has done.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to raise the issue of the freezing of thresholds and the effect on state pension, because when the Chancellor did it in the budget, she told Martin Lewis that some people will be pulled into paying tax and won't have to pay small amounts of tax and won't have to do a tax return. Well, the updated forecast now says this year 600,000 pensioners will be brought into paying tax, and going to 1 million by the end of this Parliament. So could she set out what the definition is of small amounts of tax and what the mechanism is she will use to make sure they don't have to do a tax return?
Chancellor.
As I said after the budget last year, if you just get the basic state pension, you will not be paying tax. We will be setting out more details of that in the coming months.
Madam Deputy Speaker, if lifting the two-child benefit cap is such a moral imperative of this Labour government, could the Chancellor advise the House why it was that only 20 months ago their commitment to do so was entirely absent from the Labour Party manifesto, and why it was that 19 days after that election they withdrew the whip from 7 Labour MPs for the apparent crime of voting for that moral imperative?
Chancellor.
I've always been clear that any policies that this government will announce will always be fully costed and fully funded. And it wasn't until the budget last year that I was able to guarantee that. We set out how that would be funded through the gambling tax and also cracking down on tax avoidance and tax evasion. But perhaps the Honourable Gentleman could advise why he wants 500,000 children to return straight into poverty.
Morrison.
The statement began really well by outlining the desperate international situation and by praising our armed forces. But does the Chancellor agree that her remarks would have been all the more credible if she had announced that the dither and delay that has plagued defence spending over the past 18 months was brought to an end, and that she had set a date for the publication of the much-delayed defence investment plan?
I think it's a little bit rich for the Conservatives to talk about dither and delay when it comes to defence spending. They had 14 years and defence spending fell as a share of GDP. We are increasing it, the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, and that is the right decision in light of the challenges it faced. But frankly, if the Conservative government had made those choices sooner, we might not be in such a position today.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor calls this the right plan, but for who? For farmers being taxed to death, waspy women who are still waiting for justice, for small businesses and hospitality firms barely surviving, for hard-working childminders who are set to lose their 10% tax allowance. With energy price rising excessively because of the escalating conflict involving Iran, families and businesses are already worrying about heating their home or filling their cars. They have heard absolutely no hope, nothing today. What they see is soaring public spend on housing and support for asylum seekers, unachievable and expensive net zero spend while their own bills are rising. When will this government put hard-working British families first?
Well, it was a Northern Ireland executive who came to us asking for additional money this year to fund their priorities, which we have given, and also in today's settlement an extra £380 million in day-to-day spending and £10 million in capital spending for the Northern Ireland government to invest. If the Honourable Lady doesn't want that money, I'm sure other parts of the country would.
Catherine Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Derby will be the home of Great British Railways, which, with rail continuing its journey back into public ownership, will be focused on serving passengers rather than profit. Under the previous government, rail fares rose by 60% between 2010 and 2024, and now, with Labour, they are frozen. Does the Chancellor agree with me that bold measures like this to tackle travel costs will help bring down the cost of living?
I was really pleased in the budget last year to announce the plan for Derby alongside my honourable friend and her neighbouring MP in Derby, as well as the Mayor of the East Midlands. Derby will benefit from hosting Great British Rail in the way that we will all benefit from better train services under Great British Rail, and Rolls-Royce will benefit from higher defence spending and higher energy spending, including on small modular reactors, bringing more good jobs, paying decent wages to Derby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Blairite policies told 50% of my generation to go to university. And looking back at the conversations, rarely did anyone ever talk about who would pay for these students to go to university, and then how the jobs market would then take on this amount of graduates. Now, it's clear that the student finance system doesn't work at the moment. And the goalposts keep shifting with government policies. I think there is a cross-party view that something does need to be done about this. So does the Chancellor view this as a serious issue, and what does she plan to do about it?
The view of the electorate just 18 months ago was that it was time to get rid of the Conservatives because of the broken system that they had left, whether it was student finances, the NHS, our prisons, our schools that were crumbling, and as a result, he's sitting on those benches, and I expect he'll be for many years to come.
Given what the Chancellor has just said about gas prices going up nearly 50% in the last week, her budget promise to reduce household energy bills by £150 is going to ring hollow for many people. But if cost of living is the real concern, isn't the biggest mistake to increase taxes by £66 billion? That is the equivalent of nearly £2,300 per household. And if that money is needed for public services, nearly all of that, £54 billion in fact, could be got by reducing the welfare bill to 2019 levels. So is it sustainable to keep raising taxes on people in work in order to pay ever more benefits to people not in work?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Well, huge respect for the right honourable gentleman, but he left a massive black hole in the public finances. There hadn't been a spending review for years, and during that time, inflation had gone through the roof because the Conservatives lost control of the public finances, and so we had to find the money to properly fund our National Health Service. And it is a bit rich for the party opposite to say that we should bring welfare spending down when they presided over a huge increase in welfare spending. And on the burden of taxation, our choices ensured that it is those with the broadest shoulders that are paying higher taxes. We got rid of the non-dom tax status. We're introducing the higher value council tax, VAT on private school fees, the energy profits levy. We are ensuring that it is those with the broadest shoulders that pay the higher prices, rather than the increases in inflation and interest rates in the last Parliament, which hit working people.
Today's spring statement debate produced one of the most combative Treasury exchanges Parliament has seen this year. Rachel Reeves defended Labour's economic strategy by arguing that her government is investing in Britain's future while restoring stability after years of economic uncertainty. She pointed to forecasts suggesting improvements in living standards over the coming years, increased defence spending, investment in public services, and measures designed to support long-term economic growth. Throughout the debate, she repeatedly argued that difficult financial decisions were necessary to rebuild the economy. Opposition MPs painted a completely different picture. They accused the Chancellor of presiding over slower growth, repeated tax increases, rising pressure on businesses, and a growing burden on working families. Several MPs questioned whether Labour's economic promises were matching reality, raising concerns over fuel duty, national insurance, defence spending, the North Sea energy sector, and the overall cost of living. Critics argued that the government's policies risk making Britain less competitive, while placing greater financial pressure on households. For millions of people watching at home, these arguments are not just political theatre. They affect mortgages, fuel costs, pensions, wages, jobs, and the price of everyday essentials. That is why every budget and spring statement matters to families and businesses across the country. Today's debate showed that Parliament remains deeply divided over the direction of Britain's economy, and those disagreements are unlikely to disappear anytime soon. What do you think? Has Rachel Reeves presented the right economic plan for Britain, or are MPs right to say her spring statement simply doesn't go far enough? Share your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoy our coverage of PMQs, Treasury questions, budgets and the biggest Commons debates, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Britain Daily and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest political clashes and breaking news from Westminster.